fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and our warrior. 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. Of course, I'm Al Warren, and you got Mr. Joe Goldberg, just raring to go.
I'm in the house, Al. I'm in the house.
In the
I'm
house.
looking out the window watching summer go by from my house.
Yeah, it goes fast, you know.
I've noticed.
Yeah, especially at your age. Things are going really fast now, aren't they, for you?
I was waiting for that. Yeah, it's a ticking clock. Life is ticking. Thanks for bringing that up.
So, thriller. We're going back into the thriller. That's why you're here.
That's why I'm here.
You're the spy master.
Well, that is true. That is true.
So now we've got a great guest here, of course. Now his new book is called Chameleon, and it's a black box thriller. Remi Adeleke, thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Remi, now just looking through your history, wow, you had quite the life. I mean, you looks like you were born in Nigeria, and after your father's death and the government problems and stuff, you ended up in New York, the Bronx, in the 80s. When you were going through that time period, that must have been just awful. It must have been a terrible struggle. What did you see for a future for yourself at that time? What were you thinking?
Well, this was 1987. I was 5 at the time when the Nigerian government stripped my dad of all of his wealth, and we went from riches into poverty. So because I was 5 and so young, I didn't fully understand everything that was going on. And when we came to the States, my mom did a really, really good job of masking the reality of what had happened. She was able to take some of my dad's art and his books and, she peppered it throughout our small little apartment in the Bronx, always kept it clean. She was a stickler for whatever you do, whether it's cleaning, brushing your teeth, or washing the dishes, do it right. And so that transition wasn't hard for me. And, keeping in mind that when I was a kid, and I think this speaks for most young kids, the world is so big to you, no matter how small the room it is that you're in. And so the transition wasn't rough. It wasn't until I got to around 8 or 9 years old and I began to realize I'm not in Kansas anymore, and this is a really rough area.
So did you kind of hold on to a lot of the things that you went through back then, and do you use them today? Is that something that you've kind of turned around into something positive?
Oh, 100%. I don't think that I know for a fact I wouldn't have made it into the military. I wouldn't have made it through SEAL training. I wouldn't have operated at the level that I operated at and, be where I'm at now as a writer, director, producer, and author without that hard upbringing. People ask me all the time, not ask me, but they say, your life would have been so much better if the Nigerian government had stripped your family of everything and you grew up rich. And I say absolutely not, because, going through that hell really refined me into the man that I am today. And I know without an unequivocal doubt that I want to be who I am today without all the adversity. So the adversity was good. And it definitely shapes the team, running scams to getting beat up to, getting shot at. All of that stuff allows me to write more authentically and write from a place of experience opposed to a place of having to research alone.
When did the creative arts, fine arts part come in it for you? Everything you do is in that vein after the SEALs. When did that play into your life?
I would say it came in pretty early. My mom, she was always into the arts, and we were poor growing up in New York City. And so what she would do is she would get jobs at museums, art galleries, playhouses, and festivals in order to be able to expose us to the arts for free. So I remember being 7, 8 years old and going and watching Showboat.
Yeah.
And hearing Old Man River, that old move, man. So I remember doing those things, and so I fell in love with arts. And another thing, my mom recognizes the arts as movies and film. Like, to her, that was the pinnacle of the arts. To be able to write a story and then have somebody shoot that written piece and bring it to life. And so my mom would save her pennies, and once a month she'd take us to a movie. And that's where I got some good education. And in reality, that's where I got exposed to the SEAL team. So the arts was essentially pressed upon me at a young age. When you have some parents who put a baseball, basketball, football, or jiu-jitsu outfit in front of their kids and say, hey, let's get to work. My mom, it was the arts, but it was also a pen and a paper. So, from the time we were really, really small, she would make us read New York Times articles and books and write reports on those books. And if those reports weren't near perfect, she would make us pick another article or another book and start all over from scratch. Because from my mom's standpoint, she felt as though if my brother and I knew how to articulate our thoughts in a literary format, then we would never, ever be without a job. And so this was all introduced to me at a very young age.
Oh, your mom sounds like a special person.
Awesome. She's 70. She'll be 71 next month. God bless her. She's everybody thinks she's my sister because she looks like she's about 40. She works out every day, does pull-ups, push-ups, runs. I mean, she was my first Navy SEAL instructor before I had one.
Yeah. She can kick your ass, Joe.
I wouldn't get that. I'm sure she can.
Well, when you were in the Navy and you're coming out of it, was there something that made you want to get into what you're doing now, into the writing, into the filming, the directing and everything like that? Did you know at that time, during the Navy time, that you were going to get into this?
No, not at all. In fact, I would say my last few years in the military, I started my bachelor's, finished my bachelor's before I got out. I got my bachelor's in business, and then I started my master's in organizational strategy. I was going to, look, there's so many people at BA, so I was just like, I want to do something different. So it's still part of the business school at University of Charleston, West Virginia, but I chose the organizational strategy route. And my plan when I got out was to go into business consulting because I have a brother-in-law who's a YPO, or YPO stands for Young Presidents Organization. There's chapters all around the world. In order to get in, you have to be a millionaire or billionaire and under the age of 40. And so my brother-in-law had been in YPO since his late 20s, early 30s. And he would always get me consulting jobs with his friends' companies and YPO and his company as well and his forums. And so I didn't want to be the Navy SEAL that's just taking the principles that I learned in special operations and passing them on into the business world. I also wanted to be able to have some education behind me. So I was in grad school, not just when I got out, but before I got out. And my plan was to do business consulting full time. I ended up getting out of the Navy in January 2016. And fast forward to May of 2016, I was at my office writing papers for school, and my phone rang, and on the other end of the line was a woman who worked for a little director by the name of Michael Bay. And
good call.
And Michael Bay was looking for a person with my background in special operations to work on a little movie called Transformers: The Last Night. And so she asked me if I was available. I said, yeah, all I'm doing is writing papers for school. And she said, can you send me some pictures? I did. And about an hour later, she called me back and said, Michael Bay would like to hire you. It's just going to be one day. So I went up to LA the next day, filmed, and did some consulting and some acting on it. And then about a week later, I got a phone call, and the woman said, Bay wants to hire you for another 3 weeks. So I flew out to Arizona, filmed for a week, flew from Arizona to Michigan, filmed for 2 weeks. At the end of those 2 weeks, another lady approached me and said, hey, Michael Bay wants to keep doing the film until we wrap in December. And so that was what started my career in Hollywood.
So is that a lucky break or is that hard work?
I don't want to call it a lucky break because I wasn't looking for it. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I would say it's being open to an opportunity that I was foreign to me, right? Acting and consulting, working in the film and TV business and storytelling was something that was foreign to me, and as it relates to an entertainment standpoint. And so I I would just say it was being open to the unexpected opportunity.
You've got a new book, Chameleon, and it looks like it's book 1 of 1. So is this going to be a series, or is this just going to be a standalone?
Yeah, it's going to be a series. It's a 1 of 3, actually, but I'm not going to do 1 with William Morrow. I'm not going to do 2 and 3 with William Morrow. I'm just doing 1 with William Morrow. And then I'm going to do 2 and 3 with another publisher that we're going to start going out to after the release of book 1.
Okay, so what is the premise of this book? Like, what's the idea behind it?
Yeah, so it's very loosely. The best explanation I give it's a fictional extension of my first book, Transformed, my memoir. In every special operator, every Navy SEAL team, each person has a specialization. And I was a medic, but I was also a human guy, which stands for human intelligence. Now, when I was writing my book, Transformed, I couldn't go into great detail as far as what I did on the human side. I've gone through various 3-letter agency training programs and learned tradecraft, learned source handling, pretty much learned how to do spy stuff as a frogman. And then I got a chance to go overseas and actually put my training to work. And I was able to touch on it lightly in my book Transform. There's actually a chapter in my book Transform called Chameleon. And so after I wrote the book, I then decided, you know what, let me write a screenplay called Chameleon. This is after I wrote my Transform book, so that I can go into greater detail while fictionalizing everything. And so essentially, Kali Kent is Remi Adeleke. He has a very similar backstory as me. He was born in Nigeria, and there was some corrupt things that happened in his family, which led to him and his mom being exiled from Nigeria to the United States. He ended up growing up in New York City and rising up through the ranks, and instead of him going into becoming a Navy SEAL, and he enters into the CIA black box program, and he learns how to become a chameleon, which essentially he goes to method acting school, and which is a very specialized method acting school, and he learns how to become whatever character he needs to become at the drop of a dime. So this book follows Kali Kent and his team, which is made up of Thane Macklin, who is Overwatch, so he's in charge of the team. He's a former chameleon who just graduated to an Overwatch position, and then there's a ghost agent who's a part of the team, and her specialization is getting in and out of places like a ghost or planting herself in places where nobody expects her to be. And then there's a one agent named Spencer, who's essentially their driver. He's able to drive any vehicle like the wind. And so this team, led by Kali for the most part, they go on a mission to identify and then take down Lucas Van Groot, who's essentially manipulating the worldwide stock markets through a ransom gambit. When I was writing the book, I didn't want to do your typical, the bad guy has a nuclear weapon, or there's a MacGuffin that we have to chase, or biological warfare. I think as I was writing, I was beginning to realize that a lot more people are privy to the realities of economic warfare and financial depression. And so that's essentially the nuclear bomb here. Is Van Groot is a very intelligent man and knows how to manipulate worldwide markets for his good and to destabilize economies. So that's essentially the mission, is to find him and stop him before things get further out of control.
So, Remi, there's a lot there. Did you start with the plot ideas, or did you start with the characters?
Character. Yeah, for me, it's always character drives plot. Whether I'm writing a screenplay or a book, it's always about the character. I have an idea of what the plot is. You know, like I knew that I wanted to do something different. I knew that I wanted it to be the antagonist to be Lucas Van Groot from South Africa, former cellular scout. I knew that there was going to be this hidden partnership. I don't want to give away that we discover later in the book, and then through that partnership that Van Groot has, he's going to be able to do exponentially more damage. I knew what the plot was going to be, but I always start with the character, and because once I develop my character, how they look, how they feel, what their emotion is, what their no-go criteria is, all of these different things that comes with developing a character, I know that character is going to help me get to where I want to be in a plot. But it's going to essentially drop the breadcrumbs as to how to get from plot point 1 to plot point 2 to plot point 3 to plot point 4, so on and so forth. And so that's where I always start.
Well, let's get to that. How do you build out your character? Do you picture them? Do you have themes? This person represents death. This person represents funny. This represents person that, the other.
Well, that's a fantastic question. So I actually start building my characters years before I start writing anything, interestingly. I have in my cell phone, my iPhone, I have this notepad app. And, for example, for Chameleon's been in my head for over 10 years. And over the course of the 10 years, when certain things came to me about the character, I would just drop a note. Kali is by the book. That was one thing that came to me, like he needs to be by the book. And then maybe a year later, or, a few months later, something else comes to me, or I hear a line of dialogue that I feel would fit right for that character. Not here like from a film or a TV show or book, but like a line of dialogue comes to me that is in line with what I think this character will be. And I'll drop that into my notepad. And I'll just drop all of these things that I accumulate over the years, sometimes months, sometimes depending on the project, but years for the most part. And so by the time it's time for me to put pen to paper, the character's already there. Because I've been able, for example, Nevaeh, who's one of the lead characters, she's the ghost agent in Chameleon Black Box. And I remember, I want to say it was about 4 years ago, I was speaking in Colorado, and the guy who was my driver who picked me up, he said to me that his daughter's name is Nevaeh. And I had never heard that name before. It was such a beautiful name. He started explaining to me the meaning and how the name fits her so well and her personality and all these different things. And so that conversation that I had 4 or 5 years ago became the foundation for Nevaeh, who's in the book. And then again, as things came to me, then I would drop that into my Nevaeh folder. So that's how I developed the character. It's not something where I, just sit overnight and start throwing stuff at the wall. It's something that happens over time. Even now with Chameleon 2 and 3, there's certain characters, there's certain plot points when I'm driving down the street or I'm in the gym working out and certain ideas come to me or certain character names come to me, or I see something or I have a conversation with somebody and I just drop that in a notepad. I'm not going to be working on book 3 for at least another year and a half, 2 years, but when I get there, I'll have everything that I need.
So which character do you relate to the most, or do you think you're in the most?
So the lead protagonist of the book is the character that I relate to the most. He is me. I am him. And it was very easy, even though I did pull stuff that I came across over the years and put it into my Kali folder for the most part. Kali's me. He's from where I came from. He grew up where I grew up. He has my same predilections. He tries to be by the book. He's very driven, but being very driven is his downfall. Just like me, that's my downfall sometimes. It was my father's downfall, surely. He was just such a driven man that, he couldn't see the people who were going to betray him because he was just so focused on his vision. And that is me. And that is Kali. Kali is just a very driven man. And so that comes from me. So Kali is me and I am Kali for sure.
How do you describe your relationship with your other characters then?
They're people that kind of came out of my head for the most part. So, Nevaeh is also loosely based off of somebody I know and a certain relationship that I have with this person. It's very, again, I always go back to Chameleon is a fictional extension of Transform. So there's certain characters in Transform that when people if they read Transform or read Chameleon, they'll see the connection there. Even Kali's mother is very, very loosely based off of my mother, and so the way Kali relates to these other characters and the way I was able to write it in a very relational way, so it doesn't seem like here's a character that just dropped in a book and here's another character just going to drop in a book and I'm going to put them in a room together. The way I was able to create it where they have these deep, or it seems as though they have these deep-rooted relationships and connections is via pulling from my friends, my family, my experiences and putting it into the book.
So in your books are some interesting topics and places. How does setting play a role in your books?
Setting is also everything. I chose places. I tried to choose places that I haven't operated in or worked in. I tried to choose places that to me reads like places that I would have loved to operate in, that are beautiful. So, for example, Brazil. We open up in Brazil, in the triple canopy, the jungle of Brazil, and also going with the character, right? The characters that I created, it makes sense for them to be in this particular part of Brazil. And the protagonists that are going after these particular characters, it makes sense for our protagonists to be there because they're doing a specific mission there. So, my setting is driven by two things. One, by the characters, because the characters driving the plot, where we go and why we go there. But also, too, by, places that I always wanted to go to, but never had a chance to go to. South Africa. I always wanted to go to South Africa.
So you went there for your research?
No, I didn't. I did a lot of research online.
Hooray.
I wish.
So the evil person, the bad people in the book, and the ones that cause trouble, how do you get into the head of that kind of a character?
Because I was that kind of character. So, before I joined the military, I was a criminal. As a matter of fact, when I went to go join the Navy, I had 2 warrants out for my arrest. I had a warrant in New York and I had a warrant in New Jersey. And so, I not only was I a criminal, but I grew up around a lot of criminals. I grew up around a lot of drug dealers. I grew up around murderers. I grew up around a lot of very bad people. And, in fact, it was my subtle change came when I got involved in a deal with a drug dealer that went bad. I sold him some products that were supposed to last for a certain amount of time. Those products lasted for a fraction of that time. And not only was my life threatened, but my mother's life was threatened. So, the way I got into the headspace of the antagonists and these bad guys was just kind of falling back on the bad guys that I knew, the bad guy that I was, but also the bad guys that I went after when I finally got into the SEAL teams. And as an intelligence guy, as a human guy, I tell people all the time, I got a chance to live the best of both worlds. Not only was I SEAL that got to kick down doors, but I also worked on the intelligence side where I was meeting with sources and tasking my sources to go collect intelligence for me, vetting intelligence against ISR footage, against SIG, against all of these other means of intelligence gathering. So I was able to learn a lot about the guys that I went after, some very, very evil men. And so, between the people that I went after and studied, and for the purposes of taking them down on missions, and then also my background being a bad guy, and then having lived and grew up around a lot of very evil guys. I mean, I remember when I was a kid going into the local bodegas and seeing the mafia guys with their big collars on coming in and shaking down the store owners for taxes. So again, between my experience as a bad guy and the bad guys that I grew up around, a very eclectic group of bad guys that I grew up around, and then me going after bad guys, that's kind of how I was able to build out my antagonists and bad guys.
Well, then, as you're building out your character and your plot and your wealth of experience, are there things that you say, I don't think I should put that in the book, or maybe I should really cover this up? Not because of the intelligence side, I do that, that's fine. But just I don't want to use the word cancel, but are just things you say, this may not be the right thing for this book?
I can't think of, I can't think of anything that I was hesitant about putting in, or anything that I was going to put in but ended up not putting in because I was fearful of getting canceled. Definitely was very careful, very, very, very careful about putting anything that might be sensitive information. So no, I can't say I did.
Now, violence on the page, are you conscious about the violence or how you write the violence?
I am very conscious. I try to write violence in a way that is, that flows naturally and is realistic, and I don't like to write violence that is unnecessary. I don't like to write violence and action just because this is a chapter that requires an action scene, so let me make it overtly violent, right? And going back to character, Kali. There are times when Kali, I could have written Kali doing something violent to a bad guy, but that's not the character. And it would be totally unnecessary and uncharacteristic for me to write Kali smashing somebody's brains in, or, shooting up 100 guys, by himself. It would be unrealistic for me to do that when I know that that's not his character. So when it came to violence, I always fell back on, one, is this what the character would do? Whether not just the protagonist, but also the antagonist, right? Would this antagonist murder one of his henchmen just because? And more than likely the answer was no, he would not, right? So if I'm on character, I felt bad. I had to ask myself, is this necessary? Is this violence necessary in this chapter or in this sequence? Or is there another way I can relay what I feel needs to be relayed without violence? So that's kind of how I dealt with it. Always goes back to character and then my gauge. And the cool thing about when I watch certain movies and I just see action that makes no sense, it's just like the writer or the director is just putting that action or that violence in there for the sake of, hey, it's the 20-minute mark and we haven't had something happen for a while, so we need to put it in there. I can smell that out right away. And I think that heads up readers and heads up audiences can as well. So
yeah, I call that lazy writing / jump the shark writing. It's trying to put in the bullet whizzing by the ear, missing by an inch, and the hero does backflips and shoots the guy in the head as he hits the ground and running.
Oh yeah,
sounds like your everyday life.
That's true. The Remy's not mine.
Underneath the thrill, the excitement, and the storyline itself, the adventure, it seems like the characters and the whole thing is very important to you. You're very close to it. So is there a subtext, or is there some sort of a meaning or a theme that you hope people, readers, take away?
100%. So right now here in America, we have so much division, political division, racial division. I mean, you name it. And, a lot of the things that we fight about is, in my opinion, is absolute foolishness. And I truly believe that there are entities outside of the United States that's stoking the fire, because that's how you take down a society, is by dividing them first. So it's an age-old divide and conquer method that works, and we do it in combat all the time. And there are countries that do it, politically and do it with by other means. And so what the underlying theme throughout the book is it comes to the surface more so towards the end of the book, when the President of the United States is confronted by his chief of staff. But it's this idea that we are divided for no reasons, for foolish reasons, and a lot of our division comes from the top. And we can somehow or some way, recognize that and try to become understanding of each other. You can't have understanding without conversation. It takes conversation to create understanding, and then it takes understanding to create unity. That's one of my beliefs. And so I tried to have like this indirect conversation that's under the surface throughout the book, so that way I can, in the reader's mind, when we get to that last part, the crescendo, where I'm a bit on the nose, not literally, but on the nose from the perspective of bringing the message to the forefront, people can gain some understanding, because they're like, it's like, I see why the president made this decision, or this politician made this decision. It wasn't for the greater good of everybody as a whole. It was for the greater good of his political party, right? And so that's the message, is the importance of unity. There's actually a line of dialogue where the chief of staff says, hey, this is not the United States of Republicans. This is not the United States of Democrats. This is the United States of America. And I'm neither a Democrat or Republican. I'm an independent free market capitalist. But I wanted to be intentional about getting that out there, so that way, people would look at their neighbor differently. Even if they disagree politically, they could find some type of common ground, because at the end of the day, regardless of whether we're black, white, Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarian, whatever the case may be, we all have some type of common ground, and at a minimum, that common ground is we're all Americans. And so that's the message that I hope people get. It's an inception, as Mr. Christopher Nolan called it.
So what do you read?
I read a lot of different things.
Yeah, you have a lot of themes there, so it's like, okay, what do you read?
Yeah, I read a lot of political commentary. Obviously I read screenplays because that's a part of my job. So different perspectives on screenplays. I'm into history. I wrote a script called The Last Shall Be First. It's a true story about the first group of African Americans to serve in special operations. So I read history. So I read a little bit of everything, especially stuff that connects with the stories that I'm trying to tell.
You read in genre?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm not. I'm agnostic as it relates to genre. I read what interests me, what interests me at the time, right? Because I might be in a season where I do want to read history, but I might be in a season where I want to read something as it relates to self-help, or I want to read something as it relates to modern politics or politics from 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I'm pretty fluid when it comes to what I read.
So what do you get out of each one of these books? When you finish a project like this one, do you notice any change in yourself?
Noticing, yeah, you know what? I feel more confident as a storyteller, especially not just after it's been completed, but after, I get feedback from people and not necessarily feedback, but I get messages from people saying that they've been impacted. At the end of the day, that's my goal as a storyteller. Whether I'm writing a book, whether I'm making a film, is what I'm making impacting, or will it impact, or does it have the potential to impact? If I'm writing a story, creating a story, and I sense in the beginning there's no impact, there's no way to impact an audience, I'm not going to do it. I won't continue forward with it. Case in point, I wrote and directed a short film called The Unexpected, and it's a film on organ harvesting. Human trafficking is something that I've been passionate about for the last few years, as I've had the opportunity to partner with different nonprofits and witness it firsthand. It's such a horrific thing. And so I made this film called The Unexpected in order to educate the masses on, not just on human trafficking, because when people hear human trafficking, they automatically their mind just goes to sex trafficking, but that's just one facet of human trafficking. So I wanted to focus on specifically organ harvesting. And I say all of this to say, once I put that film out on YouTube, I got so many messages from people saying, this moved me, this impacted, I want to do something, I want to volunteer, I can't believe that I didn't know this was happening, I'm crying, right? And when I got those messages, I was like, great, I did my job. And that gives me more confidence as a storyteller. And so I say all of that to say that's what, for me at least, that's what I get out of telling these stories. It's, people get impacted, and when I feel like I've done my job, it gives me more confidence to keep telling stories, and different type of stories as well. Yep, they can go to YouTube and just type in The Unexpected. And it'll pop up. It's a 32-minute short film. As a matter of fact, that film got picked up to be a feature film. And it's going to be a $35 million budgeted action thriller, but we're going to be able to expand on the story and get the story to a wider audience. As a matter of fact, that was the call that I just received from the WGA, because that's the film we're trying to get a waiver on to go in production. And so it's a very important topic in that film. And also on that YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, Remi Adeleke, where the film is. So to make things simple, they could just YouTube Remi Adeleke, my YouTube channel, pop up, and the film is right on the homepage. But there's also other interviews on my channel of actual traffic victims, and also people who were part of the film who had experience with human trafficking. And so there's some other educational information on it as well.
That's great stuff. I'm going to ask the cliche question after that. More important comment is, you do a lot of things, Remi. What do you like the best? Which one says, I got to do this? I know you've been asked this a million times, I'm sure, but people want to know.
Being a writer-director, that is what I love the most. I love writing a screenplay and then taking off my screenwriter hat, sitting in the director's chair, and watching what I wrote come to life. That's what wakes me up in the morning. That's what drives me. And that's what I love. I don't mind writing books. I enjoy writing. As a matter of fact, Chameleons started out as a screenplay, as I mentioned earlier. It was supposed to be a screenplay that I was going to direct, but somebody read the script and said this should be a book series, and so I kind of reverse engineered it and did the book. But I can't wait for the day where I'm on set directing Chameleon as a film. especially directing from the script that I wrote. So that's what gets me out of bed.
All right. So where do people find Remi? So are you on social media? Do you have a website? If someone wants to follow you, what do they do?
Yeah, just, Remi Adeleke on every social media platform. I got a unique name, so you can find me that name at every platform: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Just REMI with an I, not a Y, and an ADELEKE, and also on YouTube. That's where I can be found.
Great. Of course, we'll put all that up on our website so people can find you easily with one click. And we appreciate you being on the show. It's amazing. What do you got coming up next? I bet you got a lot of projects going on.
Yeah. So I have, obviously I got Chameleon coming out, and I'm not sure when this is going to release, but people can get signed books between now and the day of release, Tuesday, at the Talk Shop Live link in my bio. So I got this book coming out. I also have a TV series I can't really go into detail about that's going into production next August. It's an unscripted TV series, really, really cool military series. And then my book Transform, my memoir, got picked up to be a major motion picture with a major studio. So after the I already turned in the screenplay before the writer's strike, so that's done. So hopefully after the writer's strike we can get to work on that. And got a documentary coming out in the fall called Hero. And I have a narrative podcast series that I host called Downrange with Tenderfoot TV and iHeartRadio. The first episodes release on Veterans Day 2023. So I'm sure I'm forgetting some other things, but that's what's at the top of mind right now.
That's okay. I mowed my lawn yesterday, so take that. Yeah.
Well, and if you need an actor, Joe's available.
I'll definitely keep you in mind.
Well, we appreciate you being on the show. Of course,
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Chameleon, a black box thriller, and our guest is the writer of that, Remi Adeleke. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night. This is the production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.